Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Well Played. I'm your host Bluetongue. From around Sydney, Australia, I'm joined by the other hosts. Galloping in from Gladesville, we have Bauxite. How are you, Baux?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. As you know, I'm on a job hunt at the moment, and I've got a couple of really promising leads and a couple of interviews lined up. So, I'm stoked. I'm hyped to, see how these are going to develop. Yeah.
Awesome. Bounding in from the Blue Mountains, we have Cam. How are you doing, Cam?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. This week has been an interesting one. Any of you listeners who have in-laws and who have them sort of come and stay with you, we rent from our in-laws here, or from my in-laws, from my wife's parents. So having them come and stay is like having in-laws come and stay as well as having a landlord there. So yeah, that's been interesting. But apart from that, doing really well. And
fantastic.
And how are you doing?
I guess you have to keep your house nice and clean when the landlord and the in-laws come over, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of the combination of all of those things in one nice, neat little package. So
beautiful.
Yeah. That sounds like a totally unstressful environment.
It entirely is, yeah.
Good.
And how are you going this fine week, Bluetongue?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. I'm currently really heavily invested in the new season of Diablo as of last night. Been raiding through all my Blizzard games as per normal, and I've also recently discovered I can't drive for the next 4 months, so I'm looking forward to putting some serious Ks in on the bike and walking places. Good times. So, firstly, a quick explanation of what this podcast is about. It's essentially about sharing comic books, graphic novels, movies, TV shows, computer games, board games, and MMA and wrestling we enjoy with our listeners. For those of you who are already aware of the subjects, hopefully we can give you a bit of a deeper insight into what it's about. So, essentially, without further ado, let's get stuck in. The first thing we wanted to tell you guys about today was Saga. Now, it's a graphic novel, for those of you who aren't aware of them, by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. And I'm personally up to book 4. Did you call them books, or are they more volumes?
So here, there's the comic book, which comes out every month, apart from when they're on hiatus, which is currently up to chapter 29. But there's also the graphic novels, which are kind of the collection. I guess you could call them volumes or what have you. They've just released the hardcover of the first half, I guess, of the series. So yeah, I think some of us are reading individual issues, some of us are catching up sort of volume by volume.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I'm at the end of volume 1, which I think ends at chapter 10. So I'm quite early on in the piece, just started reading last week.
Okay. And how do you guys feel about the novels so far? So, Bauxite, where you're up to, and with not a huge background in graphic novels, what do you think of the actual series?
Look, I like it overall. A couple of things to note that I wasn't warned about. This is not something that is that you're really going to open up and start reading around your in-laws or at work, for instance. So it's quite graphic. Not in it's sexually graphic. Not in a gratuitous kind of way, but there are bits shown.
Yeah, they don't pull any punches when it comes to yeah.
Yeah, and similarly with the violence, it's not gratuitous violence, but bits are getting cut off, and it's just shown plainly in the paper.
Yeah.
So, having someone look over your shoulder might not necessarily be the most comfortable experience, but, I'm definitely enjoying the storytelling. The art style is interesting to me, and there's a lot in the pictures as well, which I quite like.
So I feel like there's that experience, I don't know if you guys have had it, where you sit on the train and you might be watching a TV show or a movie, particularly I'm thinking about Game of Thrones, where you're watching it, and then like an elderly person comes and sits next to you, and then suddenly it slowly rotates about 45 degrees so that they can't hopefully see what's on your screen because it's about to get very full on. Have you guys had that experience?
So I personally sort of gave this series, I've given this out to a few people, and just because it's excellent. And one guy, he his wife, the first thing that she saw when she found that I bought this for him, the very first scene was this one scene in Saga. They go to this planet called Sextillion. Now, I won't describe exactly for our listeners what it involves, but that was the first thing that she saw.
Yeah, it's almost like you could just say, use your imagination. That's probably about right.
Yeah, as in anything that your mind comes up to when you think of a sex planet, that scene entails. And this is kind of the thing. This is the sort of stuff that Brian K. Vaughan, in his writing style, the way that he kind of lays this sort of stuff out for the artist to follow, he lays out this sort of stuff. He deliberately requests it, and every single time he requests it, it seems like Fiona Staples complies and does really well with it. But yeah, he's not afraid of having some of that content. And certainly I've had times when I've hoped no one could see what I was reading when I was trying to catch up with the series.
Yeah.
I found that the actual the content of it really speaks to the fact that it's something that Brian K. Vaughan has been thinking about for a really long time. That's the explanation that I've read about online when he's spoken about it and done interviews and stuff, is that it's almost his baby. Like, he's been thinking about it and constructing this universe since he was quite young. And it kind of speaks to that, and that when you're that young, that's kind of where the way your mind kind of leans.
So, but I mean, apart from the graphic, sexual content and violence content, which, isn't the main point of the series, at least not what I've seen so far. I really enjoy the fusion of what looks like, magic and technology without being steampunk, which I quite like. It's got some really interesting characters in there, and they're really fully developed characters as well.
Yeah, I really like that feature as well. Like, you essentially, the way it's portrayed is that there's two different sides to a conflict, and each of those sides has their sort of advantages, one being more technological based and the other one being a more magic based, for want of a better word. But the magic's just what is it? There's a TV series. Oh, it's in Thor and stuff where what is perceived as magic by one race is just old and sort of advanced, super advanced technology by another race.
I mean, there's also things like, ghosts and that sort of thing, which occur quite, I guess, spoilers, towards the end of the first volume. And to me, that's quite supernatural. Which, but still very enjoyable to see, ghosts interacting alongside characters right next to robots. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, something that, going back, so in preparation for this podcast, I kind of went back and looked at, the previous issues and kind of some of the initial letter columns. So one of the things that if you go on and you read the trade paperback collections that you'll miss out on is the letter column. It's not often that you recommend an entire entire series based on the letter call alone, but the letter column for Saga is one of the most hilarious kinds of interactions between fans and the people that produce the comic. And Brian K. Vaughan in particular.
Cam, what exactly is the letter column like? I've no idea.
So it's the letter column is basically when someone writes in and gives some feedback, asks questions of the of the authors and of the people that write and produce and create the artwork and everything like that. It's sort of central mode of feedback and way of kind of communicating directly with the fans. Brian K. Vaughan is particularly hilarious in this, and like looking back at it, kind of one of his early requests was no email. So if you want to write to the people that make Saga, you have to use the snail mail system. He's such an online guy that it's kind of him, I guess, seeking something outside that online space. And so the earlier issues, so issue 3 onwards, you see a lot of people complaining about, here's this kind of fantasy sci-fi world that they've taken all this effort to construct. And then you have things like, I don't know if they're actually Coke machines, but certainly with the branding, but certainly close enough that you sort of see these, cola machines and, wristwatches, this kind of thing that some people, some people want more of a high fantasy sort of experience than them. Some people don't like to see that kind of thing in their comic. I didn't personally find an issue with that, but what did you guys think? Did you sort of see many of these elements, or is that kind of thing distracting?
I personally didn't actually even notice that. Like, now that you mention it, I imagine that I'll start seeing it all over the place. But for me, what was much more important was the originality and the creativity behind the characters and the story. What about you, Bauxite?
I've got to agree with you, Bluetongue. Having only really read the first volume, I haven't noticed too many of that.
Yeah, I also don't have that many expectations. Like, my experience with graphic novels is quite limited. Having only read this and what's that one that just got recently made into a movie? The Secret Agent one. Mind blank. Colin Firth.
It's not occurring to me immediately, but so you're thinking of The Secret Service by
Yes.
That was written by Mark Miller, who has his own little universe of comics, and illustrated by a Watchmen's artist. I'm having my own mind blank here as to who it was that illustrated Watchmen all those years ago. But that was another great one.
It's so hard to think up this stuff on the spot.
Dave Gibbons.
So Dave Gibbons was at, was it either Comic-Con or Supernova a few years ago, and I didn't know he was going to be there, so I completely missed out on meeting him. But so this is your second sort of graphic novel after Secret Service.
Yeah. For those of our listeners who aren't particularly fully aware of like the culture of graphic novels and stuff, it sort of fits loosely in with comic books. But I guess you'd call them almost a little higher art, as it were.
Well, no, you see, Saga is a comic book, really. The graphic novels, the only difference here is the graphic novel is the collection or the kind of the length of the thing. Comics can, I think, be higher art than they're given credit for, but graphic novels have this kind of connotation that kind of come with that term, as far as, it's a longer form thing. You're not, left to sort of read it over one month, and then you have to wait until the next one comes out. And they kind of go for those longer form stories as a result. But okay. It's been one way of describing them. I guess that doesn't make it sound like it's for kids. They certainly have that reputation, but you certainly look at Image, Vertigo, a few others. There's more mature kind of comic books out there. Saga fits into that, certainly that category.
Yeah, if I was going to get this for a teenager, I'd be wanting the teenager to be about at least 15, I think. What do you guys think?
18.
18.
No question for me.
Maybe, I don't know, I might be the sole guy who is kind of like this, but like I'm not going to say I had free reign as a kid kind of thing, but you know what I mean? Like, I was watching stuff like Chasing Amy or Clerks. We're talking MA or R-rated movies when I was 13, 14. Yeah. And, I mean, surely I turned out all right. But apart from that, I think Saga doesn't have that much stuff that quite honestly, that a 13, 14-year-old kid is not going to be exposed to already,
I've got that feeling that, like we never really had that stuff when we were young at school.
Yeah.
Like, pictures on people's phones and stuff like that. There's just so much stuff out there that it'd be so easy for them to get exposed to at a much younger age, I think.
And I mean, again, it comes down to sort of, there are a lot of 13-year-olds out there that are smarter than your average adult. I think, it comes down to whether or not a parent would be comfortable with sort of their kid reading something, knowing that it's going to be full of swearing, full of, some sexual stuff that your kids perhaps already encountered or heard someone more likely speak about at school and stuff like that. But knowing that there's a pretty decent kind of message in there, like kind of interesting, stuff about Marco in this. He's kind of I guess, I don't know how you guys would describe it, maybe a pacifist or kind of a guy that has taken a vow not to kill despite being in this war zone. And I think
I describe him as a practical pacifist. rather than an ideological one. I think that's how he describes himself.
I describe him as a hypocritical pacifist.
That's certainly something that gets explored later on, isn't it?
Yeah.
As far as he's a guy who is, I guess, spoiler warning, he says that he's going to defend his family and that, that he doesn't seek to kill. But later on, there's a moment very recently, I can't remember the issue or what volume it would be replicated.
He just goes bananas.
Yeah, and there's a moment where it's not actually him who makes the final decision that he is not to kill.
Yeah.
That happens quite early in Chapter 5 as well.
Yeah, like, it's pretty early on in the series. And so from that point onwards, I sort of... It's interesting, I look at those sort of changes in heart of the characters, where he's so, like, utterly dedicated to that perception or that idea, and then just change of heart at the end, and it's an interesting point to finish a novel, one of the comics on. But ultimately, I look back at it and go, I want them to be more drawn out. Do you know what I mean?
More drawn out. So do you mean like as far as the length of the story arc, or
well, no, in more that he has that perception and he sticks to his guns and he sticks to his guns and he sticks to his guns, and then finally he's left with no choice but to do this at some point later in the actual series.
So as far as the ethical kind of component and the moral questions and stuff like that, kind of building that tension a little bit more and kind of...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rather, I feel like that's almost something that's fairly comic booky in that the characters have really strong changes of heart in a fairly short time frame as far as the actual book and the presentation of the story goes.
Yeah, I mean, there are two schools of thought there. One is the old way that Marvel, for instance, used to do their books, was just you could fit as much into one single issue as you can. Nowadays, it's more about, your long form kind of storytelling. You kind of keep everything out there and kind of let it build over the course of 6 to 8 issues or whatever. That's the problem here as well with Saga's going to kind of certainly fit that. Some of the stuff they've built out far too long for my liking. I'm probably up to the latest issue, so chapter 29, and some stuff's just taking a long, long time to get to where I want to go. But
yeah, okay,
that's the challenge of pacing, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it's an issue where you've got the content coming out quite slowly in terms of, I've just come into it. I've got 29 chapters ahead of me. I can tear through it if I want to. But if you're, just reading it month to month, it can feel like not enough is happening. If you're waiting, a full month between doses of content. But for someone just coming in, it can feel like it's happening. A lot of stuff is happening very, very quickly.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's almost like the Game of Thrones issue where you finish watching it, everything happens as the episodes get released, and then you have to wait a full 12 months for anything else to happen. And so I guess someone watching the series from the start, oh my goodness, Red Wedding. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it, like mind blown. Whereas we had to wait, 2 or 3 years for that to actually happen.
So the other thing here is, for those of us currently up to the latest issue, they've just taken another hiatus. So they'll do this with Saga every couple of months. It will take about 2 months for them to get back into it. So we're not talking about a lot of time, but it freaking feels like forever. It's a long time, yeah.
When you're really strongly committed to the series and reading it, yeah.
It's one that, I mean, it could be read in multiple different ways, and however you want to approach it. If you're like me and you can't wait that kind of long period of time between issues, you want to get your shorter term fix, then the individual issues are the way to go. But do that knowing that this is one of those comics that's so good it sucks to read in that way, because that wait and having to get through that story in that way is the downside. Whereas if you can wait a little bit longer and go through those longer volumes, then that could be a rewarding thing for those of you with the patience to do that.
I personally really enjoy I'll binge read it and like blow through like 2 or 3 volumes, no worries at all. And then I get the end, I'm like, oh, how long is it till the next one? 12 months. Okay. Well, and then at that point I'll just try and forget about it, and I will forget about it, and I'll be really pleasantly surprised when I happen to be in the bookstore, as in, I don't know, 12 months later, and, the new episode's on the shelf, and I'll go and binge read it again. Speaking of where to actually get this from, for the listeners who don't frequent comic book stores and stuff like that, it's also available at Kinokuniya in Sydney, which is opposite the QVB. That's where I usually get all my stuff from, and it seems to be pretty reasonably priced. So it is a little difficult to get to. You can see it from the street, see the windows from the street, but you just need to go into that little mall opposite of where the Queen Victoria statue is, and you just go up a couple of sets of elevators, and you're there.
Yep.
The other recommendation,
If you want a digital copy, it's available on Comixology. So,
cool. Excellent.
I believe the current story there is that you can get that first issue for free on Comixology. They had that promotion a while ago. It might now be 99 cents US. So,
it's 99 cents for the first issue and $2 for the rest.
Is it like an actual? Are we talking the comic book issue, or are we talking like the volume issue?
We're talking about the individual comic book issue.
So chapter 1.
A great way to get to your gateway fix and then determine whether you want to commit to the rest of, say, volume 1 or what have you.
Yeah. And ultimately that's not a hideously expensive way to actually read it, as opposed to just buying the books outright is also quite expensive. Actually, how much do they retail for? They go for about $15. I don't know if that's American or Australian. I assume that's American.
Well, I think you're up to $59 if you wanted to get every issue. So. Yeah.
I can't remember what I was going to say. Fantastic.
The hardcover one that Cam was talking about.
Yeah, the hardcover one that Cam was talking about earlier. That's it's probably even cheaper, I imagine. Anyway, cool. Now, as far as other merch goes, I've recently discovered that you can actually get some of the other bits and pieces online, and it only just recently became apparent that Vaughan actually wanted to start actually releasing that. He's maintained a almost like a Star Wars style control over the actual production and release of this.
You mean so he's pimped it out to absolutely everyone, like Lucas? No,
it's quite the opposite. so here, this has been a massive controversial issue in comic books for the longest time. Dating back to the 1960s, you'd have these guys go work for Marvel or DC, and particularly Marvel, they would, create these characters. They'd be paid your freelance wage. At the end of it, you're like, hey, great, here's your freelance wage. Here's perhaps your royalties if they reprint your work, and that's it. So, say you created, I don't know, say Spider-Man, or you created, Fantastic Four or what have you. The artist that essentially creates these characters doesn't get a piece of the pie, so to speak. So, in this case, what Image do better than I think Marvel or DC ever did was, rather than have those work-for-hire policies, they allow the creator complete control and ownership of the property. They decide, do you want to make it kind of this media empire and make everything by way of merchandise that you can, or do you even want ads in the thing? And if you're reading the individual issues, it sticks out that there are no ads in Saga, which, Vaughan would be well within his rights to pimp the thing, to throw in some ads and that kind of content, but
or product placement.
Or product placement, which again, maybe we'll see down the line, but I think the independent ethos here is what makes the series fantastic.
When I was reading this, I was like, why has this not been made into a TV series? I cannot believe that anyone has not bought the rights to this and it becoming the next Game of Thrones or whatever for people to actually watch online, or pirate, as it were. But when I read the fact that Vaughan had maintained such a tight control over his creation, then it made a lot more sense.
Yeah, the other thing I would think about turning this into a series is that it would have to be animated, or the budget would be sky high in terms of costuming and set design and special effects. even Game of Thrones would be put to shame in terms of how much it would cost.
Also, I wonder, given some of the content we've described, how exactly you'd get some of it past the censors, if it was on HBO,
maybe
HBO
that gets away with everything, don't they?
So, Sesame Street will be on HBO soon, which will be interesting. But I mean, how they covered it, unless they're on HBO, I don't know how it would translate. And comic books can get away with actually being rather filthy in that way. Something that Vaughan always pushes the envelope on. You certainly look at Ex Machina and his other works that, we see content you're not going to see on TV. So, I don't think it would work so well on TV myself, but what do you guys think? I mean, is this exclusive to comic books? Is it something that wouldn't work in any other medium?
I think it's got that potential there. I think could be if it was done correctly, like essentially the next Star Wars, the next big sci-fi phenomenon that becomes mainstream because it's so interesting and well created. What do you think, Bauxite?
I don't think I'm into it far enough yet to really have an opinion on that. But I'm definitely enjoying it so far, and I'd like to see more. Yeah.
I understand what you mean about the production and the difficulties and stuff like that. That said, maybe you could do it slightly cheaper. It's just having had so many parts of the actual series already imagined graphically means that that's what people will be expecting, I think, when they go to watch a TV series as well. Would you guys agree with that? Or
certainly, I mean, it's kind of here a matter of that. To me, nowadays we see TV shows that have your kind of budgets that are comparable to movies, as far as higher budgets and that side of things.
And movie class actors as well. I mean, there's a big move for people like Matthew McConaughey's doing True Detective and things like that.
Kevin Spacey, etc. etc.
I mean, I'd probably trust Netflix or someone like that to do this well.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, Netflix, next big thing, buy this. Although you're probably going to need to keep Brian K. Vaughan on as the author, etc.
He's
consultant.
He's got TV experience. I mean, he was one of the 7 writers or however many writers they had on that series Lost.
Ooh.
And he himself has said the end of it didn't turn out quite as they'd wanted it to. And but that was one of his credits. So
Lost definitely started out very strong.
I mean, all of his work has this kind of element you don't see in comic books all the time, which is it's got a beginning and a middle and an end, and he's got all of that figured out well in advance. So most comic books are all just second acts, so they all take place kind of you'd have your origin story, and then you have the stuff that comes after that, but no plan in mind of ending it. Mm-hmm. Even Batman's last ever story has had 2 sequels, so it's kind of one of those things where he's a TV guy and he brings a TV sensibility to it. So to your point, he could absolutely be on as one of the creative consultants or even a producer or one of the directors or writers of the thing, and I think he could do quite well at that.
Well, I mean, the same criticism can be thrown at people like Chris Carter, who's got definitely TV chops. His quintessential work, The X-Files, it started off with an origin story, and then it was second act for 10 seasons or whatever.
And we've got the upcoming series of that as well. So.
Yeah, I'm reserving judgment. We'll see what happens. I don't want to have. I know that he can't come back to it after all this time and just give us more fill. But we'll see if he actually wraps it up nicely or not.
So is that like a reboot of The X-Files or?
No, it's I think it's like 6 new episodes that are happening, 10, 15, 20 years after the end of the last season.
Oh, okay. I can't speak to the actual series. I've not really watched any of it, so. Yeah.
It's an absolute kind of. I don't know if Netflix are currently I don't think they are currently streaming that, but that would be an absolute kind of opportunity for anyone that was looking to, to have a property that's old that you can stream for interest. I'm not sure where that's up to now, but yeah, I think that was one of those great TV shows that seemingly never had an end, that everything was second act, that again, was there a demand for it? Is that something that they needed to do as far as bringing back the X-Files?
Oh, clearly someone wanted to, and someone thought they could make money out of doing it.
Yeah, well, I think if the X-Files were to air today, I don't think they could get away with the same, like, if it was to start brand new today, I don't think they could get away with the same crap that they got away with in the 90s. I think if you had that much filler in a TV series that ran today, you would shed viewers so fast.
Yeah, I think you're very right.
Since we seem to be talking about TV series, did we want to move on to the second topic we were going to talk about today?
Not quite. There's one other thing I want to bring up that I want to see what you guys thought of. How do you guys feel about the Shakespearean equivalency of this to a certain very, very popularized romance?
Yeah, certainly the tropes are there as far as, they're from different warring factions or I found, the echoes are there, but I mean, what did you think about this, Bauxite? I mean, you've just read the first volume, I guess, so I guess in that sense, you're a bit fresh to the material than we were, but did that stick out to you?
Look, well, I'll preface this comment with a spoiler warning. At the end of chapter 6, one of the star-crossed lovers' parents come and join the party. So I'm interested to see where that comes from and where that goes. They certainly don't look very happy to see that their son is, shacked up with someone from the opposite side of the army, I guess, the opposing forces.
And that storyline was one of the interesting ones.
Is an interesting theory. We all know how that story finishes from the Shakespeare. I wonder if that's where it's actually going.
Well, the thing here too, it seems from the very beginning that she's talking. So the story is from the point of view of the daughter in question, and she's talking about her parents in the past tense. So it just does seem, that way. And they have a couple of jump cuts at several points in the story, and they've just recently completed another such jump cut. And the way that it seems to be going is that they've got a totally different story direction to what you might anticipate from the beginning volume. How I'm nervous about it. I mean, this is something that Brian K. Vaughan does well. He has these kinds of gut-wrenching series endings or ways of wrapping it all up, and I'm imagining that this is going to be equally gut-wrenching. But it does seem to be going that way.
In terms of a juvenile double suicide over, mistaken identities and emotions, I don't see either of them. I don't see Marco and what's the other name? Alana. I don't see either of them popping hemlock and, whining about how bad they feel.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Yeah. But that said, I feel like it's certainly possible that there's some sort of epic sacrifice that's made by parents which will result in possibly the conflict ending and possibly the daughter living, all that sort of stuff. I feel like that would probably be the ultimate destination for a story like this.
I mean, the thing is, it's one of those, by the time they get to that point. So, if I recall correctly, the series started in 2012?
Yeah. So
it was shortly. I remember this because I think I started reading it shortly after got married, kind of thing. So it was like I was in a new house, and this was the first series I was reading at that point. So that's how I remember. And we're now in 3 years later, and it's still got lots of steam to it. So I'm imagining we've got that issue a year or two at least, sort of in the future. The pacing of the thing. So yeah, quite a long way to go until they get to that point. Yeah, and it's just going to be gut-wrenching, I think, when they do get there.
Yeah, and like I was saying before, like having those sort of sacrifices need to be built up to the point where you care so much about the characters that is a really big deal.
And I think that's one of the strengths of the thing. We do care about these characters.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the strengths of this book in particular. Certainly not every book has that.
Excellent. All right. So that was all I wanted to hit for Saga. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
Well, I'm very much looking forward to moving on to Agent Carter, if we can.
Excellent.
Yeah, sure.
So Agent Carter is Marvel's one of Marvel's new TV series, sort of tying in with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's set in 1946, so very much in the past, and it sort of lays the groundwork for all of the things that happen in the future, in a very similar vein to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and quite different to Daredevil, I guess, in that regard. Only 8 episodes long. I've watched it. I've enjoyed all of it very much. Blue, you said you've seen a few episodes?
Yeah, I'm up to episode 3. Mm-hmm. I've just finished that, and I am thoroughly enjoying it so far. What about you, Cam? Where are you up to?
Yeah, so I finished the pilot, and I'm a little bit into the second episode right now. So, again, I kind of went into this, much like, I guess, after hearing about the reception of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and having seen a little bit of that show, I had relatively low expectations for this. But, having only seen that first episode and a little bit of the second, blown away, impressed, exceeded my expectations. What did you guys think of it? You guys have seen far more of it than I have, but what's your impression so far?
Look, in terms of, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is definitely the thing to compare it to, because it's quite similar in structure. Except Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is incredibly episodic and set in the present, and very loosely tied in with the rest of the MCU. There's a few links to the movies, and they do a couple of episodes before any of the movies come out to sort of foreshadow. Agent Carter is set immediately after the first Captain America movie, and is a lot more story arc based, rather than going for a 22 episode season with a lot of fill. It's very much on point, which I very much like about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's like one of those meals where you're going to really enjoy it, but it's too small, mm-hmm. And I want it to be bigger. But then at the same time, I look at it and I look at the production difficulties in like costuming and vehicles and
because it is a period piece.
Yeah, exactly. So it's set in the 1940s, 1950s.
Yeah, 46.
Yeah. And it's done really well in that sense. In that, like, they've got the old school like handheld telephones, and they've got all the old school makeup and hairstyles and everything like that. And I absolutely love that attention to detail they put in. But at the same time, it's painful knowing that it's only going to be so short.
Yeah, well, it has been renewed for a second season. Second season's going to have 10 episodes. So a little bit longer, a little bit more meat in there, but still quite short seasons compared to, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Daredevil was quite short as well, and it managed to pack a hell of a lot in there.
Yeah. How many episodes was Daredevil?
6 or 8.
Oh, really? It felt quite long, although maybe the episodes were actually physically quite long.
I mean, they're close to an hour a piece. With Netflix, they know people are going to binge watch it. They're going to want more content in there. I think here the difference is, ABC are going to want a TV hour, which is about 45 minutes plus your advertising stuff to fill that out. So
yeah,
I have noticed that the episodes are only 40 minutes long, so essentially you've got 400 minutes worth of content, which is a little over 6 hours.
It's not much at all, yeah.
But in terms of fitting in with the rest of the Marvel universe, there's a lot of really, I guess, good hat tips to things that happen in the future, and a lot of, solid ties to that first Captain America movie. So Agent Carter, Peggy Carter, is the main love interest of Captain America from Captain America. there's a lot of hat tips, such as the Lucky Star Cab Company. She takes a ride from one destination to another in the first episode in a Lucky Car cab, and that's the Lucky Star Cab. That's the same cab company that Captain America ripped off a door of one of those taxis to defend himself, sort of foreshadowing his famous shield. They visit the Roxxon Oil Company, which is in the background of many of the Tony Stark movies, so Iron Man. And Howard Stark's butler is named Jarvis, which is tying in with Tony Stark's AI.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like that particular character was actually quite interesting in that I was almost expecting I don't actually remember his name, the Vision character, the actual actor who's played that, to be the butler for this series.
So James Darcy is the name of the actor. He's quite an interesting guy. Has a very similar facial structure to Benedict Cumberbatch.
So this guy, Jarvis, was in the Avengers comics, he was their butler. He was, a much older guy by that point. I think he's more or less been phased out of continuity. I'm not sure where he's at in the new universe, but yeah, certainly as a character, I like the little hat tips, the little kind of the idea that he's going to be more important later. And yeah, I thought it was really, they didn't try to play him off as this ass-kicking kind of, guy who doesn't seek to fight or anything like that, but he has other skills.
He's essentially, they've just filled out for me in the third episode some of his backstory, which is awesome. But he's essentially a servant. Like, that's his job, and that's also the way he kind of helps out in terms of whatever is happening in the series or whatever superhero he's assisting at the time.
Yeah, he definitely lets Peggy Carter have the main stage. She's the one that goes around kicking ass. So.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't actually notice a lot of those hat tips that you were describing. I was, except for obviously the Jarvis reference, that made obviously a lot of sense. But I was almost expecting some of these guys to end up as villains later for like future reference, or for like a bag of tricks for later series to pull stuff out of later.
Yeah, there's definitely foreshadowing. For instance, one of the... where are you up to, Cam? You might have seen this. One of Howard Stark's technologies is a yellow liquid, and when it... spoilers. When it explodes, it's actually an implosion, very, very similar to what's seen at the end of the Ant-Man movie. So I'm wondering whether there's a link there, although it's definitely not the Pym particle, because Howard Stark at the beginning of Ant-Man is after that technology, but it does seem to behave very similarly. So it could have some tie-in there. But in terms of tie-ins with the rest of the MCU, Blue, look, watching this in sequence is incredibly valuable. I've watched this with my wife. Captain America first, then all of Agent Carter, then I think the next one is the first is the Hulk, the one with Edward Norton that was arguably terrible. But having watched all of the movies and all of the series back to back in chronological order, definitely highlights these connections.
Yeah, I'm happy that they've done that. But at the same time, I'm equally happy that they've just got a well-acted, interesting story that's well-produced. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that Peggy Carter from Agent Carter is a little bit different to Peggy Carter from the Captain America movie. Although on the surface, she's the same actor and in the same role, she's played quite differently. I found in Captain America she was really a little emotional, and quite jealous. There was that one scene where she unloads a gun at Captain America because she saw someone flirting with him or something like that to test the shield.
Wasn't he making out with one of the other secretaries or something? Like not intentionally, like he got pulled into
she kissed
an alcove.
him,
Yeah. And then she saw that. I think that was the deal.
Yeah, I don't really think that warrants you unloading a gun at someone.
Ostensibly for the purpose of testing the shield, though, it wasn't an attempt on Captain America's life. But...
No, but even so, if you've got an untested shield right there, I don't. Yeah.
I liked it. I thought it was funny.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I thought it was an emotional overreaction.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that would be seen as out of character from the Peggy Carter we see in the series.
What I find to be interesting is she gets really highly emotional at the very conclusion of the first Captain America, and obviously he then has the big crash, and I would expect someone who felt that strongly about someone else would at least want to go and say recover a body, and that's obviously not done. I don't quite get why that never, like, they just went, oh, I guess he's like, I guess we're not going to find anything. Like, I would have thought they'd gone up to have a look at least.
That sort of is dealt with later on.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a moment where Howard Stark and Peggy get a bit of resolution on that.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, towards the end of the series, it's definitely an interesting way. It's dealt with quite well, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So, what other prominent characters do we have in the series? We've got. So essentially, Peggy Carter seems to work for what we'd consider to be the FBI meets the CIA type deal.
Yeah. So the Strategic Scientific Reserve, I think it's called. It's basically the precursor to SHIELD. Yeah. It's the organization SHIELD gets born out of.
So you mentioned that starts with 1946. I mean, does it sound like other seasons are going to have later settings as far as continuity goes? Is this series going to end up in current times? What's the plan there?
Like I'm imagining where it kind of would finish is roughly that first scene of Ant-Man. That seems to be like the oldest piece of lore that we have from the movies. Outside of the Captain America bits and pieces. Oh, no? Something else?
Yeah, we have Captain America meet a very, very old Peggy Carter when she's...
in the Winter Soldier, and her daughter...
but like the most current, in sort of chronologically speaking.
Oh, you mean real life chronology?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so they've got all the space between 1946 and then, which I assume is about late 70s, early 80s, to fill in terms of story and stuff like that. So I could definitely see it going that way. That'd be really good, I think.
Yeah, I think if depending on how many seasons we get out of it, we will see Peggy Carter be instrumental in setting up SHIELD. I don't know how late they want to go. It does look like Season 2 will follow almost directly after Season 1 in terms of the timeline.
Yeah.
But it would be really interesting to see how that develops later on into connecting the old Captain America movie more strongly with a chronology all the way through to, the current stuff. Yeah. I mean, we could see the original Ant-Man, perhaps. With Hank Pym.
Yeah, that'd definitely have some potential, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That could tie in, but Marvel looks like they're content to leave that as a backstory at the moment.
Yeah, I honestly think that's not what I really want to happen, but I honestly think that the most likely scenario is that they'll just continue this chronologically and we'll probably end up in about like 1950 or something like that. So we've only covered a space of a couple of years tops in terms of what has actually happened in this part of the story.
It is a really good way for Marvel to tell the stories that have occurred in the past, and I guess preserve the chronology of the comics, and bring up the some of the older heroes in the time that those stories were written.
Yeah. So, just going back to her workplace. So she was working for, what was that place called? The
Strategic Scientific Reserve, SSR.
Yep.
Yep.
And so it's roughly the equivalent of the CIA meets FBI, which is also roughly, interestingly, that fits in real world history in terms of that was roughly when those organizations got created as well. And as far as the actual work environment goes, she's dropped into... she's got a very unique skill set. She's very highly sort of regarded in World War II. But as soon as World War II finishes, she's then thrown into an office environment.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to go from Captain America, where she's very much an important person. She's valued. Her work is meaningful, and she's hanging out with Captain America and army generals.
Yep.
To be thrown into an office where she is the tea lady.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting time in history because this is when a lot of the men were fighting in World War II and then came home. That was when we kind of have this explosion of this rhetoric of family values, the women stay at home, a women's place being in the home, and kind of that attempt to shift women from the workplace into the home sphere again so men could resume their work. And it's interesting that they handle it in that way, that kind of transition that you speak of. And I'd be curious to see, I guess, if that continues or if that if her role changes within the organization as time goes by.
Yeah, like I can definitely see that her becoming essentially the boss of that particular section of where she works, and then having to deal not with just those specific issues within her jurisdiction, but now she's interacting with other jurisdictions and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning of Ant-Man, we see that she is definitely one of the central people in S.H.I.E.L.D. She's a director, essentially. And to see her go from someone who's basically ignored and treated as someone who's useless to go to being absolutely critical to the organization will be a really interesting journey to go on with her.
Yeah, it's really ironic that she is treated that way, given that the actual group of the men in that organization seem so much more incompetent.
Yeah, and it's kind of what it plays off really, and I love that in the first episode. She goes and she's kind of in that club where the other agents have just started to get there, and kind of she's able to keep one step ahead of everyone, and the way in which she resolves everything going out on her own.
Yeah.
Well, not entirely on her own. She had certainly plenty of help from Jarvis, plenty of help from Howard Stark at a length, but I guess I wonder kind of from here, what kind of like potential do you guys see as far as this? I guess this series being that that there is that particular end point. There is the historical end point in mind. Are we looking at a long-term series here? Are we looking at something that might last a few seasons?
I think what we'll see from Marvel in general is we'll get a couple of seasons from Heroes, and they'll move on to another character and showcase those guys for a while. And there'll be crossovers, and she'll appear in different things later on. But I don't think we're going to get 10 seasons of Agent Carter. I think we might get 2, 3, perhaps 4. And we'll see her pop up in things later on.
Yep, I think that's pretty likely. I can even see her being almost reinvented at later points in the current story arc, be it as her daughter or as some sort of genetic recreation in some way, shape, or form, something like that. Would be interesting.
In terms of being recognised for the skills that she has. Even in the first season, she goes from very much being ridiculed to actually going some way to proving, I'm actually better at this than you guys.
Yeah.
And there are a number of characters who have a real revelation about her. Not everyone. Unfortunately, a lot of people can't see past the skirt and lipstick, which is, really unfortunate. But, it's an interesting commentary on the times.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a tension between the actual story itself, what they want to tell Agent Carter as being like an strong, independent woman who can do all these things better than the men can, versus what the real life was like, in which case real life she would have almost never been in that position. They would have realized that she would have had some measure of danger to her employment, and I think she would probably have been taken out of that environment altogether. That was basically how, as my understanding anyway, of a lot of those sort of situations were for law enforcement and military and stuff like that were those days.
Anyone that had a public service job in Australia who got pregnant, then the practice was that you resigned.
It was a little bit different for intelligence because women were seen as non-threatening, and so had an easier in with people.
Yeah, and spies, obviously, it's an easier way to, glean information and stuff like that in that sort of environment. Yeah, obviously some of the most famous, like, spies from World War II are all females.
Arguably, though, if you're a famous spy, you're doing it wrong.
Well, they became famous afterwards.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So, as far as the actual seasons go, I'm afraid that for those of our Australian listeners go, you can't really get this yet. It's very difficult to get your hands on, but thankfully you can get it over iTunes and the Apple Store, assuming that you have the appropriate IP address.
Yes, that's how I legally obtained it.
That's right. We all strongly recommend that you legally obtain this series.
It is perfectly legal, though. There's nothing unlawful in getting a geo-blocker and in setting up an account for a US iTunes store. Our own Minister for Communications, Malcolm Turnbull, has said there is nothing illegal about that. So have at it. I'd say it was worth it for this series. I'm not sure what the retail the entire series is.
I think they were going for about $4 or $5 an episode.
So the per
and then
episode
you could buy
cost,
the whole season together for in the order of $40 or $50. Yeah. I still think it's a perfectly valid purchase. I'd definitely buy this in a heartbeat if I could obtain non-electronic copies.
In terms of buying this versus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., 20 episodes a season. This only 8 episodes. I would much rather spend the same amount of money on Agent Carter than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think there's a lot more bang for your buck. It's a much better production, and I really have enjoyed this.
And
so,
sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So interestingly, how would you guys rate this against the other 2 TV series? So we just had Baux's opinion on this versus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. How is this rate in your enjoyment and your experience with this whole Marvel universe?
Now look, compare it to Daredevil as well. I quite enjoy Daredevil, but there was some graphic violence in that. And this is a very different tone. But I would say that I enjoyed this as much as Daredevil in a different way.
I don't see anything wrong with headbutting spikes. That's perfectly normal. I see that on every single day.
There was this one part where there was a dude and a car door.
They didn't actually show any of that, really.
It was still very all implied. Graphic, though, in terms of the aftermath of that. But look, personally, I actually, and granted, I'm looking at 1.5 episodes of Agent Carter versus most of the first season of Daredevil. But I actually think I've enjoyed this more. I think that there's a tightness to it that just is not there with the other shows. There's this element of, I maybe was expecting less, but this element of that. Okay, TV writing 101. Set up stuff in advance. Set up little threads that will be rewarding later. Set up little clues about what to expect. This was so good at that. And the kind of the tone there was like James Bond kind of esque stuff meets the Marvel Universe. I loved the, double entendre of, she has that lipstick that knocks out the bad guy, and, as soon as he falls asleep, she says, "Oh, well, that was premature." The kind of pacing was fantastic. I actually give this the slight edge over Daredevil as fantastic as that was, and I'm a big Daredevil fan, so I don't say that lightly.
Yeah, I would agree with you there as well. Like, for me versus the other two series, I've watched the other two on completion, and I enjoyed them, but this has a lot more quality to it for me. And it has a lot of aspects, being like the 1950s settings, that I just find enjoyable when told from this perspective in a modern storytelling kind of fashion.
Yeah, I like how it's got a lot going on it's got sort of channeling Raiders of the Lost Ark meets LA Confidential. And I really like that it feels a lot more like an adventure. Daredevil feels a lot like it's brooding, it's dark, it's slow. And there's fighting and that's all great. But a lot more is happening and a lot more quickly in Agent Carter.
Yeah, Daredevil feels almost like a superhero TV show meets Law and Order for me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what's happening with this legal battle today? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Whereas Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., look, there's definitely good stuff in there. The first season was sloppy and all over the place. I hate to say it because I did enjoy it. And the second season is a lot better, but it's getting tighter, and I want to see where that goes. But I think I do enjoy this quite a lot as well. I think definitely worth the money.
Yep. All right. Excellent. All right. Well, I think we'll call it a episode there.
Well, thanks for joining this week. We hope you enjoyed yourselves as much as we have. You can catch us on Twitter at WellPlayedAU, and you can send us questions, comments, or abuse, hopefully not abuse, at wellplayedau@gmail.com. And if you like, you can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That'd be great.
Excellent.
Catch you guys later.
See you, everyone.
Goodbye.